Hello travelers, welcome back to the logbook of a simple Lindworm traveler. I am Krotnip and today we are going to be taking a look at the forces of the northern tribes and in particular their unit Orc Hunters. This is going to be our first unit analysis piece and without further delay, let's get going. So, who are the Orc Hunters? The background of the northern tribes in the Warcrow book describes the Orc Hunters as being warriors who have reached maturity and as a result have earned themselves the right to engage the enemies of the tribe in melee combat and also hunt alone if they so choose, hence the name. The Orc Hunters are the basic melee infantry of the Orcish forces, but so far it's too early to say whether they will be forming the mainstay of the Orc fighting forces on the tabletop, and I was unable by reading the backstory a couple of times to get a clear idea whether the majority of the Orc warriors are indeed part of the hunter units or whether it's just a smaller subsection of the younger orcs and indeed the more veteran and elite orc units make up the majority of the orcish fighting forces. Orcs as a general rule are described in the Warcrow background as being aggressive and deadly combatants with excellent physical and mental conditioning, which leads also to the fact that the orcs tend to fight relying on their prowess rather than any discipline or more strategic way of fighting. So we are expecting then on the tabletop to see a unit that's dangerous but maybe a bit undisciplined and thus somewhat unreliable. Here we have the unit card, or at least the top half, where all the important information is found, of the Orc Hunters, taking from the Corvuspelli press kit regarding Warcrow. And I'll be using this card to illustrate as we go forward and take a look at the basic stats and abilities of the Orc Hunters. So let's go. The first thing that we will see when we take a look at the unit card of the Orc Hunters is the fact that they are extremely cheap to recruit to your company. At only 20 points a unit, they sit behind even some solo characters such as the Evoker, not to mention the named characters like Njord the Merciless, and they are just a tad more pricey than the Orc Wise main unit attachment. So points cost shouldn't be a deterring factor when you decide whether to take Orc Hunters in your forces. The 3-2 movement statistic with a 10 stride charge is an interesting spread. The 3-2 movement means that the Orc Hunters are actually a bit slower than your average human troops if we take the Black Legion Bucklermen to be what we expect a lightly armored human unit to be able to move. And when we compare the Orc Hunters to some of the Varank or Elven units that we see, those will also be able to move faster than the Orc Hunters with a 4-3 movement. Then again, 3-2 isn't all that bad. You are only losing a stride on some human units and 2 strides on more fleet-footed units. And this only comes up when you're positioning the Orc Hunters. Actually, their charge distance of 10 strides is quite competitive, and it's higher than the charge distance of any of the hegemony of Embersic units in the starter box or the Beyond box for that matter. So the Orc Hunters should be able to position themselves in such a way that they will be the ones executing the charge on the enemy and the enemy may not be able to charge them in return. and I'm imagining that this is going to be an important characteristic of the Northern Tribes forces as a whole. They are made up mostly of lighter units that are very aggressive in their combat posture, so we are expecting them to be able to leverage a higher than average charge distance in order to get the first hit in on their enemies. The Orc Hunter unit consists of 4 models, and each of those models has 2 wounds as shown by the stats card. This means that the Hunter unit has to suffer 4 wounds before it sees any impairment on its combat ability, and you can further increase this number by attaching an officer type character to the unit. 4 models and 2 wounds per seems to be quite standard for basic infantry units in Warcrow, so nothing really special there. The Orc Hunters suffer from weak willpower score and a low morale value, with their willpower being only a single orange dice, which gives them a 62.5% chance of passing a severity 1 willpower test, and with the lack of any additional dice, they will be unable to pass any severity 2 willpower test imposed by skills and keywords such as intimidating 2 or the bulwark's taunt ability. Morale 1 means that the Orc Hunters will only be able to endure a single stress token before becoming unable to activate, and any further stress tokens will lead to a willpower test that might see your unit break and flee the battle. This isn't totally surprising if we are looking at a unit that's supposed to be composed of rather inexperienced younger orcish troops. It's to be expected that if they are running about leaderless, they will not be all that stiff when they face tough resistance. But luckily, there are already some unit attachments that you can accomplish by adding characters to the unit, and this will stiff the Orc Hunters up nicely, giving them additional willpower, morale, and in case of the Wise Main, also giving them an important reroll on their willpower tests. The availability of 3 means that if you so choose, you can spend 60 points to add 3 units of Orc Hunters to your company, and at that point level investment you are able to flood the field with these dangerous, if quite basic Orc warriors. Time will tell whether this will be a strategy that several Northern Tribes army builds are going to focus on, or whether it's going to be more of a curiosity. The Orc Hunters have only 2 keywords specified on their profile. The infantry tag means something when it comes to what characters can attach to what units, for example. We can expect that infantry characters attach with infantry units and cavalry units attach with cavalry units. Also, the infantry tag has something to do with how certain terrain elements work, but as most, actually all of the units released so far are infantry, there is not much to see here. The more interesting and from the army list building standpoint more impactful thing is the fact that they have the tag Orc. Who would have guessed? This is important because in the Northern Tribes faction you have 2 different species of troops working together. You have the Orcs and you have the Varangs, and at its basic the force works in a way where the Orc characters can join Orc units and the Varangs can join Varang units. There are, however, exceptions to this. If your force is being led by either the Wrath main of the main Northern Tribes faction Alborg or his counterpart among the Varangs Ahlvard the Ice Bear, you will be able to access the War Alliance ability, which allows you to mix and match the Orc units with Varang characters and vice versa. And that, I feel, is going to be an important decision going forward when one is building a Northern Tribes force. Are they going to splash out and invest in a War Alliance character, thus giving them the ability to mix Orc and Varang units and characters, or whether they should be going with a cheaper high command option and thus limiting themselves to just Orcs with Orcs and Varangs with Varangs. The Orc Hunters have a conquest value of 1, which is something to be expected from a basic infantry unit that lacks the military training and discipline to secure objectives in a more formal and effective way. If you want to see an example of the opposite, take a look at the Black Lecher Bucklermen with their basic conquest value of 2. But with a conquest value of 1, the Orc Hunters can snatch objectives from solo characters and units without any conquest value, looking at you, skin changes. And if you add a unit attachment that increases the conquest value of the unit, then you can get to a more respectable conquest value of 2, or maybe in the future even 3. And from what we have seen so far, I have concluded that probably the conquest value of 2 is going to be something that if you can place a conquest value 2 unit on an objective, the enemy will have to send some serious muscle or invest some serious ability power in order to either drive them out of there or push them out with a more heavier and thus more expensive, more important unit. And if you can leverage a 20-point unit, maybe accompanied by a cheap attachment to secure an objective and then force the enemy to commit heavier forces in order to drive them out, you can actually trap the enemy by then counter-attacking with something of more elite nature from your side. So even though the Orc Hunters aren't an anvil unit in the traditional sense, since they are by far more offensive than defensive in their posture, they can be used in this way to force potentially the enemy to commit more resources to challenging them than is actually than the Orc Hunters and their attachments are actually worth. Then we are getting down to the attack breakdown for the Orc Hunters, and the first thing that you see is the fact that the Orc Hunters don't have any push modifiers, and the same goes actually for the defensive breakdown that we are going to be doing next. What we mean, or what I mean when I talk about the push modifier, is the fact that some units have the ability to stress themselves when attacking or defending, and thus gain additional performance on their attack or defense roll. This not only makes the unit more powerful per se, but it also means that if you then attach a character to the unit that has an additional benefit to pushing on the defensive or the offensive, you will be getting a 2-for-1 type of deal when you are in essence paying for the use of the push ability by taking a stress token, but you get to cash in 2 push abilities instead of 1. If you, for example, attach the Orc Wisemane to the Varang Skin Changer unit with a War Alliance character obviously leading the force in this case, they both have a defensive push ability of adding a red die, and the skin changers also add a automatic hit on a defensive push. So for 1 stress token on the defense, you are able to add 2 red dice and a automatic hit. And that's something that the Orc Hunters won't be able to leverage. They will only have the attached characters push ability, if any, to work with. Then again, we are talking about a 20-point unit, so I don't think it's unreasonable to think that having strong push modifiers might be too much and might have led to a unit that would cost more. As we see from the dice breakdown there, you can also check my video on the different dice and what you can expect from them. The Orc Hunters do seem to have quite a high damage output when compared to the price of the unit. The red dice, 3 orange dice and a yellow dice will produce on average 3.375 successes, and they also have a whopping maximum success amount of 6, which means that the Orc Hunters are expected to deal some damage against weaker units pretty much always, and they also have the chance of getting lucky and really hammering home the attack even by themselves. When the unit has suffered half or more casualties, its performance will be impaired, but actually this isn't too bad for the Orc Hunters. They only lose a single success from the average, and their maximum amount of successes still remains at a relatively high number of 4. This is thanks to the fact that they lose the yellow dice and a orange die from the roll instead of the better red dice, for example. When it comes to special symbols, the Orc Hunters will be producing them rather reliably also, with the average being 2.5 specials per roll, and with again the maximum being a whopping 6. This means that they have access to a reliable standard special symbol switch trigger, which they can then use themselves to inflict the vulnerable state on their enemies. And at a 2.5 average and the 2 requirement for this switch to trigger, the Orc Hunters should in the very least usually be causing the vulnerable state on any enemy that they are attacking, thus making them more vulnerable, pun intended, for subsequent attacks by the Orc Hunters or maybe by another unit. You can even double team a dangerous enemy unit or high defense enemy unit by attacking them with the Orc Hunters first, inflicting maybe, if you are lucky, some damage, but at least with high chance inflicting the vulnerable state on them, then absorbing any damage that comes your way, and then bringing in another more heavy hitting Orc unit to finish the job. And in this instance you will be able to leverage the vulnerable state on the now hopefully charging more powerful Orc or Varang unit, and in addition the enemy will have to sacrifice a die or an automatic symbol due to being engaged by 2 units at the same time. Obviously, if you get an attachment that also offers a different switch that uses the solid special symbols, you can do that, but there is some you lose some effectiveness there, because then you have to choose whether to employ vulnerable or that other switch that the character is going to be giving you. When it comes to hollow successes, there's 0.75 incoming on the average, but again the max is 5. This means that if you have a unit attachment that can make use of these hollow success symbols, there is a high ceiling available, and someone like the Orc Wrath main attached to the Orc Hunters has the chance of pushing through quite an amount of wounds if you get lucky and roll plenty of these hollow successes on your roll. Last thing, I need to come back a bit about the specials. When the Orc Hunters take casualties, up to half casualties, their amount of solid specials that they get obviously drops down, but at the same time the requirement for their solid special switch changes from 2 to 1, which means that actually even in their diminished state the Orc Hunters are still reliably putting that vulnerable state on anything that they are attacking. The Orc Hunters will also be producing some hollow specials, but they have no innate ability to make use of them. So it's up to unit attachments to give them any switches or abilities that can make use of these symbols. When it comes to defense, we already talked about the fact that the Orc Hunters lack any push abilities, so let's not dwell on that any longer. When it comes to rolling blocks on your defense, the Orc Hunters have quite a low average roll of 1.375 blocks, but at the same time the dice roll of a green and 2 black dice actually gives you quite a high ceiling amount. And if you get really lucky, you can roll up to 4 blocks with the Orc Hunters. And this pairs up nicely with their deadly defensive switch, which allows them to turn blocks into successes, thus foregoing defense in lieu of offense, even when defending. And this, I feel, is an extremely powerful ability and a key ability of the Orc Hunters. Because when you are working with a cheap basic infantry unit that only costs you 20 points and you aren't going to be that sad to lose if push comes to shove, so to say. Trading wounds with this switch mechanic is going to be very tempting and often a good idea. Obviously, if an enemy unit comes in with built-in defense dice and defensive symbols when they attack, the Orc Hunters might not be able to achieve much with this switch. And obviously, with the high volatility of this green and 2 black roll, it's possible that you just roll badly and inflict no damage of significance against the enemy unit. But then again, there is a not inconsiderable chance that you roll well and a way more valuable, way more important enemy unit attacking the Orc Hunters gets damaged or even outright destroyed by this push. And this is exactly the type of ability that I love, since it allows you to live inside your opponent's head rent-free. They are the ones who has to weigh the chance of getting killed by the humble Orc Hunters when they attack against what's the upside of attacking and potentially destroying or driving back the Orc Hunters. And all that weight, all that risk is carried by your opponent. And if the opponent charges in then, let's say with a fragile offensive unit or an important character, you are effectively printing money no matter what. If they take out a bunch of your Orc Hunters, okay, they were just Orc Hunters, that's fine. But if you roll well and you are able to inflict meaningful damage on them, you have just used their activation to inflict damage on them, and they might not be able to recuperate the situation. So this is an extremely important and impactful switch ability to have. The downside of the Orc Hunter profile is the fact that when they suffer half or more casualties, they drop down to a blue and a black defensive dice, which not only means that you are rolling on average less than a single block per defense roll, you also drop to a ceiling of 2 potential blocks, which means that this ability is way less effective. Then again, if you add a character to the unit that will give you an automatic block symbol, for example, then you start on a full unit with an average of 2.375 and the maximum of 5, which is quite scary for many enemy units to face. When it comes to specials, the Orc Hunters on the defensive will also quite reliably trigger any switches that the accompanying character has that rely on solid special symbols with an average of 2 and a maximum of 5. Again, when the unit takes half or more damage or casualties, its effectiveness in the switch department or the special department is much diminished also. The Orc Hunters will provide you with some hollow shield symbols, but with the lack of elite or any innate switches, they can't really make use of them as of now. The same goes for the hollow specials. Maybe in the future there's going to be some unit attachment that will allow them to make use of these, but as you see, the average amount is quite low and the ceiling is quite low also, so this isn't maybe something that I'd be looking to invest when playing the Orc Hunters. Okay, that was the breakdown. Now let's draw some conclusions and try and make a short analysis on the Orc Hunters before this video hits a half an hour mark. The Orc Hunters, from the knowledge we have so far, seem like quality basic melee infantry for the northern tribes. I really love the design of this unit and I can't say that enough. For a cheap investment, you get a unit that has high potential upside. When attacking, especially when accompanied by a character, they can push some serious damage in, and as a defensive piece or a counter-attacking piece, their defensive switch may allow them to take down enemies way more valuable than them. And also, as previously talked about, they can be used as parts of a several unit maneuvers in order to trap and destroy more valuable and more important enemy units. At the same time, as is really appropriate for this unit's background, the Orc Hunters lack a lot of innate versatility and they are a highly volatile unit in that they can succeed big or they can fail big, and in the latter case they will unceremoniously be cut to pieces by a more deadly, more elite enemy unit, but that's what you would expect from a basic Orc unit anyway, right? So all in all, I see the Orc Hunters as a dangerous unit more than a innately powerful unit, and that's a great place to be. Because if you are a basic unit that reliably does stuff okay, then I'd fear for your position in the army list as the game progresses and you get more releases. Since if you are doing okay stuff reliably, there's bound to be units that are more elite that can do more and more reliably, and at that point those units might be eating the lunch of that dependable basic unit. Then on the other hand, a unit like the Orc Hunters, which can swing big and get more value than you are paying for it, effectively punch up in some situations, while at the other times failing miserably and getting cut down, is the type of unit that you can add even if there are more elite units available. At the low point cost of only 20, I believe that the Orc Hunters may have a place in the Northern Tribes forces long into the future. Future attachable characters will obviously have a huge impact on how we are going to be using the Orc Hunters and how relevant they are going to be in the future tactics and army list builds for the Northern Tribes. But from the few examples that we have so far, I've been really happy how nicely the Orc Hunters stiff up and become way more effective and way more reliable once you attach a character like the Wise Main or the Wrath Main into them. I'm really expecting to be using these units a lot in the future. Okay, time to end it here just before we reach the half an hour mark that I have given myself not to exceed. Thank you everybody for being with me on this unit analysis, and it's time to say goodbye, fellow travelers.